Hollywood resistance to that movie? Like, people didn't like that you were making it, it seemed like.
Yeah, there was a lot of opposition to it.
It was a powerful film, yet it seemed as if there was resistance against it. Mel Gibson appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast to talk about the sequel to The Passion of the Christ. And what if the most controversial film of the century contained secrets that no one was supposed to discover? When Mel Gibson sat down with Joe Rogan, something unusual happened. The conversation began casually enough, talking about movies and the politics of Hollywood. But then Gibson started revealing what had really happened behind the scenes of The Passion of the Christ. And suddenly, the entire room seemed to freeze. Rogan, a man who has interviewed presidents, fighters, and whistleblowers, looked visibly shaken. This wasn't marketing. It wasn't controversy designed to generate clicks. Gibson was pulling back a curtain that Hollywood had desperately tried to keep closed. And once you understand what so many people missed in this film, you may never see it the same way again. A story no one wanted told. To understand what Gibson revealed, we have to go back to the beginning. The Passion of the Christ was never meant to be just another biblical epic. Gibson wasn't interested in sweeping cinematography or predictable storytelling. He wanted something raw, something visceral, something that would grab the audience by the throat and refuse to let go until they truly understood what sacrifice means. As Gibson explained to Rogan, the idea behind the film was simple but uncomfortable. We are all responsible for this. Christ's sacrifice was not merely a historical event. It carries implications for every person who watches it. Gibson spent years studying the four Gospels, examining every verse describing the final hours of Jesus' life. But he went further than most filmmakers would dare. He consulted ancient writings and theological sources, weaving together not only the events themselves, but also the weight behind them, the spiritual conflict, the human cost, and the divine purpose hidden within every moment of suffering. The opening scene. The opening scene tells us exactly what kind of film this is. We are in the Garden of Gethsemane. Darkness presses in. Jesus kneels in prayer while his closest companions fall asleep around him. The vulnerability is overwhelming. Here is someone fully divine, yet fully human, sweating drops of blood as an unbearable weight descends upon him. Then Satan appears, moving silently through the shadows, whispering doubts. A serpent emerges, but Jesus crushes it beneath his heel. A direct reference to Genesis and the first promise of redemption. Every frame carries meaning. Every shadow is intentional. Every line of dialogue echoes with theological depth for those willing to pay attention. Gibson created a kind of cinema that demands engagement, one that asks viewers to lean forward, think deeply, and confront something far greater than themselves, what Hollywood tried to bury. During his conversation with Rogan, Gibson revealed something that most people rarely discuss openly, something that helps explain why the film faced such extraordinary resistance from the very beginning. He noticed a pattern within the industry. A double standard operating quietly, but very effectively. Films that explored various religious traditions. They were often treated with respect, portrayed with nuance, and handled carefully. But when it came to Christian stories, the reaction was fundamentally different. Skepticism, contempt, and sometimes even open hostility. As Gibson put it during the conversation, Christianity seemed to be the only religion people felt comfortable mocking. It was as if every belief system deserved protection and respect. Until the discussion reached Christianity. Projects like this were often dismissed as outdated, too serious, or disconnected from modern audiences. The assumption was always the same. Nobody wants to watch this kind of story anymore. Gibson experienced that resistance firsthand, and painfully. Studios that should have been eager to finance a project from an Academy Award-winning director suddenly grew distant. Phone calls went unanswered. Meetings were quietly canceled. Colleagues who had worked beside him for years began to keep their distance. The message could not have been clearer. This particular story was not welcome, and neither was the filmmaker trying to tell it. The industry wasn't simply skeptical about its commercial potential, it actively resisted the message itself. But Gibson refused to walk away. His Catholic upbringing meant this wasn't just a professional project, it was personal. When traditional financing disappeared, he funded the film himself. He gathered a team of believers who shared his vision and refused to be intimidated by controversy. And what emerged from that atmosphere of opposition shocked everyone. The Passion of the Christ became one of the highest-grossing rated films in history, proving that millions of viewers were hungry for exactly the kind of bold, uncompromising storytelling that Hollywood executives insisted nobody wanted. Unexplainable events on set. The filming of this movie was anything but ordinary. What Gibson later shared with Rogan moved into territory that almost sounds unbelievable. During production, events occurred that the crew still struggles to explain. Jim Caviezel, who portrayed Jesus, endured real physical suffering that translated onto the screen in a way no special effect could ever reproduce. The cross he carried weighed more than 30 pounds. During one take, it dislocated his shoulder completely. During the scourging scene, he was accidentally struck twice by the real whips. One of the blows hit so hard it knocked the wind out of him, leaving his hands bleeding and torn. His pain was not acting. It was real, and that authenticity is visible in every frame of the finished film. Then there were the lightning strikes. Assistant director Jan Michelini was reportedly struck by lightning twice during filming. Even Caviezel himself was said to have been struck during the crucifixion scene, yet somehow walked away without serious injury. In biblical tradition, lightning often symbolizes divine power and judgment. It appears at crucial moments throughout Scripture. For the crew, what was happening around them was difficult to explain. These incidents created an atmosphere in which the boundary between the natural and the supernatural seemed strangely thin. Some people began to wonder whether something beyond ordinary filmmaking was taking place. Transformations behind the scenes. The transformations extended beyond the physical events on set. Luca Leonello, the actor who portrayed Judas Iscariot, entered the production as an atheist. But the experience changed him deeply. Maya Morgenstern, who played Mary, was secretly pregnant during filming, a quiet symbol of life and renewal intertwined with a story centered on death and sacrifice. Gibson also recounted stories of unusual recoveries. A young girl suffering from severe epilepsy reportedly went an entire month without seizures after being present on the set. Others spoke about regaining their senses or experiencing unexpected improvements in health. Whether these were divine interventions, remarkable coincidences, or powerful psychological effects, many members of the cast and crew left the project convinced that they had been part of something far greater than a typical film production. A scene that captures Gibson's vision. One scene captures Gibson's artistic vision perfectly. After the crucifixion, the body of Jesus rests in Mary's arms, an image reminiscent of Michelangelo's famous Pietà. The composition expresses pain and grace at the same time, devastation and dignity, human sorrow and divine purpose. It transcends religious tradition and speaks to universal experiences, love, loss, and hope. Critics divided, audiences transformed. When The Passion of the Christ finally reached theaters, critics were sharply divided. Roger Ebert, arguably the most influential film critic of his generation, awarded the film 4 stars. He called it the most violent and intense film he had ever seen. Ebert wrote that he had never truly understood the depth of Christ's suffering until he witnessed Gibson's unflinching portrayal. For someone known for praising great films while also pointing out their flaws, that was a remarkable statement. Other respected critics praised the film's sincerity and artistic ambition, comparing Gibson's vision to that of masters of spiritual cinema. Yet controversy came from many directions. Even before the film was released, several religious leaders reviewed the script and raised serious concerns. They worried that certain portrayals might reinforce historical stereotypes that had fueled anti-Semitism for centuries. These were not trivial concerns. History shows that such narratives have sometimes been misused to justify persecution and violence. Gibson insisted that his intention was to show the collective responsibility of humanity for Christ's death, not to blame any particular group. But the debate revealed just how sensitive and complex this story has always been. Scholars pointed out that Gibson included scenes without a direct biblical basis, such as Judas being tormented by demonic children. Gibson's response was straightforward. He explained that it was an artistic interpretation meant to communicate spiritual truths, not a documentary reconstruction. He used the language of cinema, symbolism, and visual metaphor to explore themes like guilt, redemption, and spiritual conflict. The film walked a delicate line between historical representation and theological reflection. Viewers arrived with very different expectations and left with very different experiences. Some found the film spiritually transformative. The intensity of the debate only amplified public interest. People who would normally never consider watching a religious film felt compelled to judge it for themselves. Church groups organized large screenings. Religious leaders delivered sermons analyzing its meaning. Media outlets published countless articles dissecting every frame. Gibson had created something that simply refused to be ignored. The Resurrection Project. Gibson has not finished exploring these themes. In fact, he believes he is only getting started. During his interview with Rogan, he revealed that for 6 or 7 years, he and screenwriter Randall Wallace have been developing something even more ambitious. A film about the resurrection, but not told through a conventional linear narrative. Instead, it would explore the cosmic battle between good and evil. Gibson described the project as incredibly ambitious. The story would span from the fall of the angels all the way to the death of the last apostle. This would not be a simple sequel. Gibson wants to show how the singular moment of the resurrection connects with everything that came before and everything that followed. To build this vision, he has immersed himself in ancient writings, theological debates, and historical research. His goal is to challenge audiences to look at familiar stories with entirely new eyes. For Gibson, the Gospels are not mythology. They are history, supported by the unwavering testimony of the apostles, men who were willing to die rather than deny what they had witnessed. As Gibson asked Rogan directly, who dies for something they know is a lie? For him, that question alone gives weight to the supernatural claims at the very center of Christianity. The resurrection remains the most difficult aspect of the faith for many people to accept. A man executed, buried, and then walking out of a tomb challenges the natural order itself. Gibson admits that for much of his life he accepted these claims simply because others believed them. But he is not interested in preaching to people who already agree with him, nor does he want to produce content that merely reinforces existing beliefs. He wants both skeptics and believers to confront deeper questions about existence, about meaning, and about what happens when life comes to an end. What everyone missed. So what was the hidden truth that shook Joe Rogan? What caused visible emotion in a man known for his composure? It wasn't a single revelation. It was the weight of everything combined. The truth that creating the Passion of the Christ required Gibson to stand almost entirely alone against an industry that wanted this story buried. The truth that during filming, events occurred that many involved still cannot fully explain. The truth that art created with genuine conviction can transform lives in ways commercial entertainment rarely can. The truth that faith sometimes demands suffering. That speaking honestly means risking everything you have built, and that some stories are worth any sacrifice necessary to tell them. These truths cut through the noise of a cynical age. They reminded Rogan and his millions of listeners that sincerity still exists in a world dominated by image management and calculation. That people still create art for reasons beyond profit. That conviction can still move mountains. And that sometimes the most controversial stories are precisely the ones that most desperately need to be heard. Gibson's journey represents something increasingly rare: the refusal to let industry gatekeepers decide which stories deserve to be told and which should be silenced forever. The Passion of the Christ forces viewers to confront uncomfortable realities about suffering, sacrifice, and redemption. It does not offer easy answers or comforting reassurances. Instead, it demands that we wrestle with difficult questions about human nature, divine purpose, and the price of salvation. Questions that most entertainment actively avoids. More than 2 decades after its release, the film remains deeply divisive. Some see it as a masterpiece of spiritual cinema. But great art often provokes strong reactions precisely because it touches something profound within us. The conversation between Gibson and Rogan revealed layers of truth that most celebrity interviews never reach. It showed that behind every controversial work lies a human story, one of struggle, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to a vision. It reminded us that reality still holds mysteries we cannot fully explain through purely material explanations. And it demonstrated that genuine vulnerability, even from strong and controversial figures, has the power to move hearts and open minds. That is what many people missed about the Passion of the Christ. It was never just a movie. It was one man risking everything to tell a story the world tried to silence, and a story that ultimately prevailed. The hidden truth is no longer hidden. It is there for anyone willing to look, to listen, and to allow themselves to be changed by stories that truly matter. Stories that cost something real. Stories that change everything.